Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our vlog series at KBC Church, number 2,600 and something. I'm not sure how many we've done, but we're going through and we're in a new series. And the series is 40 chapters of growth. And we're following a book that picks out 40 key chapters in the Bible that give an overview, so to speak, of the Bible, but also it gives 40 chapters that are an opportunity for growth as a Christian. And today's title is God Can Use Even Our Failures. And even the title itself brings me encouragement right from the get-go. And today the book is looking at Judges chapter 16. So in the big picture, so to speak, Israel has been in Egypt and they've been set free from slavery. They've been led out of Egypt by Moses, a great man of God, a great man who walked with God, who had intimacy with God. And then Moses died, and then Joshua took over, and Joshua led them into the promised land. And both men were great men of God in their own rights, but they were great leaders of the people. But they were great leaders of the people because they were great followers of God first. They had intimacy. They had a deep, close relationship with God. But then Joshua died. And Israel is in the promised land, and it goes through a period of about 300 years between Joshua dying and the first king, Saul, being anointed. And that period is called the Judges, and it's a period of time when there was no real leadership, so to speak. And it's characterized, this period of time is characterized by this verse that appears twice in the book of Judges, and it says this: in those days, Israel had no king, and everyone saw fit to do as they pleased. And so during this 300-year period, there was a pattern that often appears. It's like a cycle of events, so to speak, because there was no real great leadership. There's this pattern that would happen. The first thing would happen was the people would abandon God. As a nation, as a country, collectively, they would forget about God. They would forget how good he's been to them in the past. Reminds us of our nation right now, doesn't it? And then God would allow a crisis to happen. He wouldn't send the crisis, but he'd allow a crisis to happen it would call their attention, so to speak. It would remind them that they need to call on God, and then that would happen, that the Israelites would call on God for deliverance. They would cry out, they would remember who he was, and they'd say, help and deliver us. And then God would raise up an action hero figure, a judge, they're called, in the book of Judges. And this action hero figure would rise up, and he would win deliverance for the nation again. And then they would have a time of peace and a time of stability while the people walked with God again. And so this pattern, this cycle, it happens 12 times in the book of Judges. And 12 times God raises up a judge, a person to bring deliverance. And each person has got character flaws, that they're not perfect. And that brings us encouragement that God can use people who fail. And the person we're looking at today has obvious flaws in his character. It's the man Samson. And he epitomizes the Judges because he's got obvious flaws, but obvious strengths as well. And Samson's a man of supernatural strength, but he's also a man of natural weakness. And the chapter starts with Samson goes to Gaza, and he sees a beautiful woman. She's a prostitute, and he goes in and sleeps with her. He spends the night with her. And here we see Samson's obvious flaw. It's his lust for beautiful women. His flaw is his desire for sex that he has no control over in his life. And sex is something that we don't often talk about in church for obvious reasons, but it's a gift from God. It was God's idea. The first time it happened with Adam and Eve, God didn't go, oh my goodness, what have I done? God designed it. It was his gift. And it's a good gift from God for man and a woman to enjoy the beauties of relationship. But the problem is, anything good from God, when it's used or misused, it can be destructive, and it can have a real detriment effect on people's lives. So we need to remember that it was God's idea, and it's a good idea from God. And everyone is familiar with the story of Samson and Delilah, and Samson's great strength was in in his hair and the story behind it. But Samson had made a Nazarite vow, and his vow was never to drink, never to cut his hair, and never to touch a dead body. But can I suggest to you that this morning that Samson's strength was in his vow, which was in his commitment to God, which was in his commitment to follow God and to walk closely with him by being committed to that. But he had flaws, and his flaws was his lust for women and his failure to be completely obedient to God in all areas of his life. And one of Samson's flaws is perhaps that because he'd won victories and he'd been strong in battle, perhaps he'd become arrogant and a little bit too cocky, and he'd put himself in the wrong position where he could be tempted and fall into sin. And the danger of thinking you're too strong, it's pride, and we think we're stronger than this situation. If you're an ex-alcoholic, it isn't a good idea to go on your own and sit in the bar. Or if your problem's gambling, it wouldn't be a good idea to go and sit in a bookies. We need to be wise, and we need to be honest. And it's actually strength to acknowledge that we are weak in areas, and we need accountability, and we need to be wise and not put ourselves in silly positions like Samson did by going to Gaza. Normally we look at a character in the Bible, we can look at them and say, yes, that's a great example of what to be like. But Samson is a great example of what not to be like. Don't follow his example. But at the end of his life, we see that he wins a great victory, and he destroys lots of the leaders of Gaza who were enemies of Israel. And here we see a picture of a God of second chances, a God that can use our failures and mistakes, and he can bring about a great victory. And that's one of the things that's beautiful about the Christian faith. We have a God of second chances. We have a God who forgives. We have a God who forgets. We have a God who can use our mistakes and bring about good in our lives. He can use our mistakes to minister to other people who are going through the same situation. But we need to be careful with that, because we need to go, oh, God can use my mistakes, I can carry on making them. Well, we shouldn't do that, because that's not the right way to live. God can use our mistakes, but he wants us to live pure and holy and be the best people that we can be in our lives. But our studies are on growth. How do you grow as a Christian? Well, when I was in Albania on the first day, we met with one of the leaders. He took us for coffee, and he said, what's the difference between reading the Word of God and studying the Word of God? And we said, oh, tell us. And he just said, a pen. If you want to study the Word of God, get a pen and paper and write some notes and dig deep. And there's a difference between just reading the Bible. You can read the Bible in a year and not take it in. But if you study the Word of God, if you make some notes on it and let the teaching of what Jesus tells us to do, or what the Bible tells us to do, if we obey it and apply it, then our lives will be transformed. And it's an absolute guarantee. I know that from experience in my life and many people as well. When we study the Word of God, it can bring transformation, and we can be so blessed and enriched in our growth in our Christian journeys. Have a great day, everybody. God bless. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.